I was the only journalist in the country who interviewed both Mr. Jaitley and Mr. Chidambaram on the same day of the budget for 4 years. No other journalist did, because that's how the lines were drawn.
Former journalist. Were you comfortable, are you comfortable with the decision to boycott certain television anchors? Tell me why.
I'll tell you why. I am not boycotting journalists here. The 14 who've been boycotted are propagandists. They don't do their research. They don't do shows which are based on issues. They do shows which they are being told by somebody in the PMO to do. Given how the dirty tricks department and the fake news factory of the BJP works, they would have torn into pieces by now if I wasn't an objective journalist. They've tried to look for a lot in my work.
Supriya, is it tougher being a politician or a journalist?
I think in today's times, it's very tough to be a journalist if you really are a journalist in the true sense of the word, because you're not questioning the government, you're not questioning those in power, you're not questioning authority, you're not questioning those who have access to resources and institutions. You are basically chasing a WhatsApp forward that you get from the PMO. So I'm presuming it must be very tough to be a journalist, at least if you call yourself one. Being a politician is easy, at least in my party and in my place, because I stand for what I believe in, and I'm pretty. I go behind my beliefs very doggedly. So I think it's easy being a politician.
But to shift gears and make that adjustment, when you did, what did you have to unlearn and what did you have to learn?
So I had to unlearn being diplomatic. I think I had to completely unlearn being diplomatic. I had to learn holding on to my beliefs with all the courage that I had in me. I think each human being stands and believes in a few things. So did I, even as a journalist. But you know, when you're a journalist, and I'm hoping and presuming that a lot of people believed I was a very objective journalist. I had access to the BJP as much as to the Congress. But I do believe that when I quit journalism in 2019, the shift had happened. I mean, you know, the WhatsApp forwards had started deciding newsroom narratives. The editors weren't really taking calls. I was fortunate enough to work in a channel where we could still do. But I would see, you know, channels around me, people around me, where that decay had begun to set in. So I think I was fortunate that I got this opportunity. I was fortunate I could make the change. So yeah, I think I unlearned being diplomatic and walking with conviction.
Did you have a tipping point? Like, was it a pull towards politics or was it a push away from media? Which one was it?
So quite honestly, Barkha, I think I come from a political background. I never wore it on my sleeve. People find it very difficult to believe, but most people in the Congress did not even know that my father was a member of parliament within the party.
I mean, I had no idea till recently.
Yeah, I mean, my colleagues in media did not know. People within my party, my General Secretary Communication got to know after I became chairperson social media. So I think that's how it was. People in the BJP actually knew about my father more than the Congress did, because I think that's the BJP. They do a background checks and all of that. But to ask your question, was there a tipping point? I think I was getting disillusioned with what the media was doing. And I think you'll understand this. When you're in the media, you see the truth without the filter. You know, media happens to be that filter between what is happening in policy making vis-a-vis what people are going to be seeing in terms of what you're going to report. So I think I could see things without the filter, and I wasn't comfortable with it. I wasn't comfortable with the fact that policy making was also happening to chase a headline, to set someone in motion. So I think I was getting disillusioned. But it so happened, and it was unfortunate that my father had passed away. In fact, I lost both my parents and my brother in a span of 3 years.
And your brother?
Yes, I lost my brother. So this is 2014. I lost my mother. She fought cancer very bravely for, I think, about 5 years. 2015, my brother passed away in his sleep. He had a cardiac arrest. In 2016, my dad passed away. So
and
actually,
how old was your brother? As you
he was 39 when he passed away.
With no history of heart disease?
Nothing at all. We've never had a heart issue in the family. But you know, this happened in a span of 3 years. And I think when you have when you see loss like that, you really see life objectively. And I think between 2016 and 2019, my defense mechanism was that I drowned myself in work. I thought that was my escape. I would chase the biggest interviews. I would do everything. I would want to do everything first. I was doing 2-3 shows a day. I was doing the big interviews. I was traveling. I was doing all kinds of things. And then I realized, why was I doing that? I was doing that because I was running away from a reality that was staring me in the face when I went back home. I mean, there was this huge vacuum.
Yeah.
And I think that was my defense. But I thought that was a defense that can only be transient. It can't be a defense that you can see your life through. And then I think the larger purpose of life in terms of what I really wanted to do, I was always very politically agile. I was always very politically aware. And I think I got this opportunity and I went with it because I do believe, I think since I was a child, I always knew I'll end up in politics. I never thought I'd end up when I did. And I never thought I'd end up, I really loved being a journalist, by the way. I loved doing what I was doing. I loved the shows. I loved the interviews. I loved asking questions. So it was a tough call when I would think about it initially, that how am I going to leave journalism and be in media, be in politics someday? But I think because of the circumstances and the fact that I was getting very disillusioned with how things were. And let me tell you, I was very well placed. I wasn't attacked by the BJP. They thought, I think a lot of them still compliment me. I had great access to BJP ministers and their leadership. But I just thought it's not something where my heart lies.
You spoke about being a very objective journalist.
I was the only journalist in the country who interviewed both Mr. Jaitley and Mr. Chidambaram on the same day of the budget for 4 years. No other journalist did, because that's how the lines were drawn.
Yeah.
You were either one camp or the other.
Now, every time a journalist migrates into politics, the question is asked, was that journalist objective? Maybe that journalist never really was objective. How do you respond to that perception? Whether it's you, Ashutosh, and by the way, this hasn't started with your generation,
Absolutely.
Our generation. This has been happening for decades.
Sure.
How do you answer that question?
So I answer that question with only one line, that given how the dirty tricks department and the fake news factory of the BJP works, they would have torn me to pieces by now if I wasn't an objective journalist. They've tried to look for a lot in my work. I know for a fact that they've gone back in time to look at my tweets. They've gone back in time to look at the shows that I did, to the panels that I had, to the people I had hosted, and they haven't been able to find it, because if they did, they would have torn me to pieces, but they haven't. In fact, foolishly enough, they put out some tweets of mine which were actually criticizing the Congress, sometimes, and that's what as a journalist I did when I felt the need to. So I think my objectivity comes from the fact that I think 4.5 years into it now, and the BJP hasn't been able to blow me into pieces, at least for my work.
We see you every night on television, and you were on this side and now you're on this side, and obviously having been a journalist makes you a better spokesperson because you can anticipate some of the questions.
I don't know about that, but yeah.
But television news to some degree is, if I may say so, quite unbearable these days.
That's putting it mildly.
How do you go through that drill with as much passion and ferocity, night after night after night, when there's a kind of sameness to the questions you will be asked, the criticisms that you will be asked, even the compliments you might have been given? How do you, because when you're a journalist, you can inspire yourself to do better. As a spokesperson, what is the life of a sort of very prominent spokesperson like yourself?
So I'll be honest with you. I think saying it's, did you say it's noisy? I think that's putting it very mildly.
Noisy, and I said it's a bit of a sameness to it.
Yeah, sameness to it. I think it comes from two things. I think it comes from a place where, how much do you believe in what you're articulating? So I'm articulating a certain point of view, I'm articulating a certain position. How much do I believe in it? And I have been fortunate enough to believe in what I frankly stand for, at least so far. I really do believe in the things that I say. I think information and data really excites me. I think it's a training as a journalist. I don't go to shows and indulge in whataboutery. I think it's undermining the audience. I think people come to the shows, they want to watch you. And I think if I make a difference at all is because I go to the shows prepared. I really do read a lot. I get my data.
You do your own research?
I do my own research. I do my own data. And I think it shows through, and especially if you speak with conviction. I will, however, say one thing. I mean, who am I to say the sameness of it all, or for that matter, these are such biased, prejudiced debates where you're not just, if you're in combat with a BJP spokesperson, it's far easier because they never come prepared. They indulge in whataboutery. You can bust their fake news. You are speaking to a BJP spokesperson, to an anchor who's more loyal than the king, and to an RSS political analyst who's sitting there in the garb of a political analyst. But I draw a lot of inspiration from my leader, Rahul Gandhi. I mean, what has not been hurled at him? And for him to walk with the courage of his convictions, it's remarkable. I mean, if he can do it, who am I to say it's same or otherwise? I think, and I also think every issue gives you an opportunity to get to the table some insights that are being missed, some truths that are being ignored, some facts that are being misreported. So I think I make a mark, or if I do at all, is because I really believe in what I do.
I'll come to Rahul in a couple of minutes. But as a former journalist, were you comfortable, are you comfortable with the decision to boycott certain television anchors? Now, of course, having been around as both of us have been, boycotts are not new. Boycotts have always existed. Sometimes they've been de facto, sometimes they've been de jure. But when you look at this list, some of the questions that occurred to me were, if there is hate mongering is not possible without the consent of the boss or the promoter.
Yeah.
But you all have not boycotted the boss or the promoter, right? In some cases, the editor of the network has been boycotted, but not in all cases. Therefore, even from an effective point of view, putting aside the morality of boycotts for a moment, have you gone for the low-hanging fruit? Are you comfortable, having been a journalist for as long as you have, with this boycott politics?
100%.
Tell me why.
I'll tell you why. I am not boycotting journalists here. The 14 who've been boycotted are propagandists. They don't do their research. They don't do shows which are based on issues. They do shows which they are being told by somebody in the PMO to do. And not the Prime Minister, maybe. Somebody who's perhaps a lowly clerk in the PMO is telling them what shows to do, what lines to take. It is, and we did our own research while we did this, by the way. It wasn't a whimsical decision that we got up and we said we want to boycott these 14. It's not as if we like their faces any less or any more. There was a lot of empirical data that was seen in terms of, we analyzed their shows. We saw, and you and I both know, television news, the prejudice doesn't come in by what the anchor is saying. It also comes in by the Astons, the supers, what the show timing is. Who are your guests? How balanced? The hashtags? How balanced are your panels? And what is the speaking time for each one of them? So I think these are the things that we really saw. We saw what their shows were called. We saw what the hashtags were being used. We saw the promotion of the shows by the anchors themselves on social media. We also saw the kind of speaking time that opposition was vis-a-vis, the treasury benches were getting. And I think empirical data did suggest that some of this was really going out of hand. And some of this was purely based on fiction. I agree with your point that these anchors can't thrive on their own. There's a larger corporate backing them. Their corporate bosses are deciding that. I think if we had boycotted TV channels out and out, or media houses completely, that may have been under question. That, are you anti-media? But I think we chose to boycott these guys because they stand for nothing. They actually stand for propaganda. I mean, some of the questions that they raise are actually, their shows have caused strife. Their shows have caused communal violence. So I am not saying don't do it. It's your call. You're a citizen of this country. If you believe what you're doing is right, please go ahead. I am not going to be cannon fodder for the hate that you want to dish out every evening, because I think it's because being on those shows is legitimizing what they're doing. So I don't think I want to legitimize it.
Do you think that one needs to separate propaganda from hate? Because certainly there are propagandists, i.e. there are journalists or anchors.
Aren't those lines blurred?
Huh?
Aren't those lines blurred now? Propaganda and hate?
Let me put it to you like this, that there could also be propaganda on the other side, i.e. there could be a journalist who says, I really like the Congress, or I really like Mamata Banerjee.
How many of those guys are there?
Maybe not very many, but there are some who are seen to be today ferocious critics of the government who are journalists. But hate mongering, to put a skull cap up for graphics when you're in COVID, to have anti-Muslim slurs sort of mainstreamed and legitimized, that's of a purely different order. So should we mix up the two?
So the underlining factor, if I may go back to the argument that I was just making, is we are not going to be party to your hate campaign. We are not going to be party sitting there while you are inciting violence, while you are stoking sentiments against one particular community, while you're showing only one strand of truth and not showing the other. We don't want to be party to that. You can continue to do it. I mean, by all means, who are we to decide what an ex-journalist is going to say? But today we have come to a stage where some of the people who we've boycotted on economic issues like tomatoes being sold at 300 say that you should actually not eat tomatoes because they cause kidney stone. I mean, how much of ring fencing will these guys do for the government? And which is why I say hate, of course, continues to be one side of the story, but the other side also happens to be the propaganda that comes with it. I mean, you forget about any of this. You see some of the personal opinions some of these guys dish out on their own social media accounts. They're not being pressurized by their bosses. They're not being pressurized by their editors, but they're so deeply biased. And these guys have big followers. It causes disharmony. I'm not willing to be party to your hate campaign.
Is there a danger, though, of a kind of competitive permanent cancel culture that we are creating? When I say we, I mean largely we, politicians, media, journalists, everybody around us, because the BJP has also boycotted many anchors without calling it a boycott, or sections of the BJP have.
If I may just say for 10 seconds, what amuses me a lot is that when we boycott these 14 anchors, it's not their editors or their owners who get in touch with us, but it's the BJP that's outraged. Why? Because they are better spokespersons of yours than some of the spokespersons that you send on air. It's actually, that's how I see it.
How did these boycotted anchors react? Did anyone try to reach out to you guys?
I mean, a lot of them did. Of course they did.
And said what?
I said that, we are objective. Look at our shows. I've been on those shows, so please don't tell me you're objective. And I think it was a collective decision taken. It's not just while the Congress is being questioned a lot, because obviously we're the largest party in the India Alliance, but the reality is that, we sat together and took this decision collectively. And if 28 parties in this country who represent 60% of the vote share believe that you are biased, there must be some truth, a kernel of truth to that. Some of them got in touch, some of the editors got in touch. There's always room for redemption. Redeem yourself. It's not as if it's cast in stone, and I'm not saying redeem yourself and become my cheerleader, but at least don't do to this country what hate mongerers have done.
Now, one of your responsibilities is also to strategize on narrative, communications, all of that, public communication. Is there a danger that the Congress could become what it opposed or said it opposes? In other words, are you borrowing from the BJP playbook in labeling people for and against? If you don't believe this, you're this. Because on Twitter, for example, everything is very polarized today. And so sometimes, you can get slammed by the right wing. Sometimes you can get slammed by the left wing. And that's fine. It's par for the course. You live in the public gaze. All of that is okay. But has the Congress decided that we are going to compete with the BJP in its own language? Is there a little bit of that? Because one does see it in spokespeople like you. You're much more aggressive than an earlier generation, let's say, of Congress spokespeople.
So I will answer that, and I will also say one important thing here, and just to carry forward the conversation that we were having on these boycotted anchors. We have chosen to boycott these anchors. We continue to go on a lot of shows. None of those are big fans of either us or the Congress or cheerleaders. But we believe that even when they question us, and they question us very harshly, I'm fine being questioned harshly. You throw facts at me, you put me in the dock, you do all of that. But you cannot undermine the fact that I represent a political party. You cannot have a deeply prejudiced bias which is visible on air against my leadership. And you cannot use me to push your polarized communal narrative. So I think on that. When you say we are borrowing from the BJP, absolutely not. But I think the bad penny needs to be paid back in kind, and exactly in bad penny. I am a Gandhian. But I also believe, I think, one cheek being slapped and me offering the other, it doesn't hold anymore. Because, and I'll be honest with you, I'm very aggressive. I think I'm very assertive. My rule is very simple. I call the Prime Minister always Prime Minister Modi. I never say Narendra Modi or anything. I always refer to him as PM Modi, Prime Minister Modi, because I think his office deserves that respect. It's absolutely same for other ministers as well. But if you breach a line about my leadership, then I'm not going to sit there and stay decent and quiet and smile over it. If you say two things, then I will end that argument.
No, that's fair. But tell me this before we move on to the larger politics. What is the dynamic off camera between
not very good anymore.
Warring spokespeople? I come from a generation, as do you.
Exactly. Back when
where at the end of a show, you could see a chuckle between two people across the aisle.
Yeah.
Does that happen?
I think it happens sometimes, but mostly, no, it's not true at all. Because I think it has become extremely acrimonious. And I think it's also a sad commentary on our politics, where we are no longer political opponents. The opposition is seen as a political enemy. And I think that's how the behavior is. And I'm not fine with hanging around and having a cup of tea with somebody who's just called my leader names. I'm not fine with somebody who has some really nasty and explicit things to say, which are absolutely false about Mrs. Gandhi, or for that matter, Rahul ji. I mean, why would I take that line down? Why would I be fine with somebody who says that Pandit Nehru is responsible for all our misery? I mean, are you so dumb? And if you are a propagandist, then I don't think I would like to share my cup of coffee with people like you.
And yet Rahul Gandhi walked across suddenly one day and gave the Prime Minister a hug.
He's a saint, I'm not. I think I learn a lot from him, I'll be very honest with you. And I don't know if I should, but when I look at him, I do sometimes feel I wish I had his forgiveness. And I'm not saying this just because he's my leader and, I'm on camera. I do sometimes wish I had his forgiveness. He carries no anger. In some sense, it is, I find it very tough sometimes. Yes, I think with passage of time, with life and with losses, you do realize that anger is way too corrosive. I think hate is anyways very corrosive. So I don't carry hate, but I do carry anger sometimes. Increasingly, when I look at him, and when I interact with him, I feel like, it's insane to be angry. I'll tell you a very small incident. We were walking in Bharat Jodo Yatra, and all these people who say the nonsense that they say about him. We were walking in Bharat Jodo Yatra, and I said, and each time the BJP said some 15 lies which were blatant about the Yatra, and this was all on camera also. And I said and we were walking, and I said, I really hate them or him or something I had said about someone. And there were no cameras. It wasn't as if he was trying to make an impression. He just turned and says, but why do you have to hate? You should learn from it. I mean, hate is too strong an emotion. Don't carry it. I looked at him and I said, says a man who for the last 12, 15 years has been brutally trolled. His reputation, every effort has been made to, assassinate his reputation. I think to grave possibilities of physical harm, the BJP says a lot of things about him. And if he doesn't carry anger, then maybe I should not also.
Was it an impression you had from afar of him when you were in your journalist avatar that changed when you got to know him?
Yeah, of course. I think I always thought of him as somebody who's... as a journalist, I would meet him. So I thought he was very bright. I never bought into the stupid narrative that the BJP peddled. I also had some insight because of my father, who worked with him. But I always thought, he was bright. I always thought he was very dignified. I think when I got to know him a little after I joined the Congress, I think he's a man who has very, very high quotient of empathy. And to me, that was I respect people with high empathy, because I think to empathize with somebody else's pain or their grief or their sorrow, and I think after I saw what I saw in my life, I think it's a very commendable. So I think he's very humane. From a distance, you look at political leaders and you feel, okay, he's bright, he's very convinced about what he's doing, he's very courageous. But I think he's an extremely humane, compassionate man.
You once said in an interview that Priyanka Gandhi Vadra had a lot to do with your decision eventually to join politics. Yes. Talk about that. And there's endless speculation about, are they different? Is Priyanka the future? Is she? Less so after the Bharat Jodo Yatra, where I think people got to see Rahul Gandhi in a different way, in a different context. But before that, there would be this endless sort of speculation. Talk a little bit about why and how she influenced your decision to enter politics.
So before I say that, I must say that I got a chance to work with her very closely during the UP elections and thereafter. And when I say empathy for Rahul Gandhi, I look at them and also Mrs. Gandhi sometimes, and I wonder, for the things that this family has gone through and for what has been hurled at them, and you see them at close quarters and they, the kind of lives that they live, contrary to what the narrative gets peddled. They live such normal, basic lives. He perhaps owns 3 or 4 pairs of t-shirts and that's his, that's what he wears all the time. Or for that matter, she is such a different person at home, extremely warm and, so much of a homebody and extremely courageous. I mean, she's a power to reckon with. I think she really is. I don't like the comparison with Mrs. Gandhi. I think Mrs. Gandhi was who she was. I think she's a person who really knows her mind. She knows exactly what she wants from life and from politics and from her family. But I look at her and I feel, how do these people not carry the anger, not carry, you can when things like these happen to you, I don't know how people deal with it, but you can carry a lot of angst against the world in general. I don't see that at all. I mean, they're extremely happy people, extremely contented. So I think one learns a lot in that sense. She was one of the trigger points for me to join politics because it was around the time when she became UP in charge. I got very excited. I mean, there was some talk about me joining and I said, no, I'm a journalist. I'm happy being this. I also thought it was too much of an opportunity cost from, being a reasonably well-paid editor anchor to the heat and dust of politics. But I think when she came to UP, it just gave us a lot of, at least for someone like me, it gave me a lot of courage. Like, okay, she's going to be in charge of Uttar Pradesh, things. I could get an opportunity to work with her. I had heard a lot about her. She's somebody I didn't know, by the way, before I joined politics. Each time after I joined politics and after I went to her, after my elections, I think the advice that she gave me, I was so right in joining politics, especially at a time when she was in charge of my state. She didn't tell me to go all guns blazing, and she told me, think about what you're doing, oppose what you don't like. Even when I became a spokesperson, I'll be very honest with you, when I joined Congress and I never thought it was a big deal to be a spokesperson because we come from television.
Correct.
So, you feel like, what's the big deal about being a spokesperson? So I said, no, I'm not interested. But I do realize that being a spokesperson is a very responsible job because you are actually, in some sense, peddling the narrative of the party. So, I also think she convinced me and we had this chat and she said, no, you should take it up because it's you'll be able to talk about what the party stands for. I wasn't very convinced then, but I did thank her much later after.
Would you and others want to see her contesting in these elections?
Well, let's see what she wants to do.
Or a larger role of some kind?
I think somebody like her will have a larger role. I don't think it's only me expecting, but somebody like her, look at the kind of narrative building that she can do. I'll give you a small example. We were in Karnataka elections and Mr. Modi had come to campaign and he started with his usual, about terrorism and she blunted his narrative and how. When people say, she said, yes, of course, who are they to talk about terrorism? I've lost my father to it. I've lost my grandmother to it. So I understand what terrorism means. Mr. Modi can keep moaning about the fact that people abuse him. You're the prime minister, you have to have a thick skin. You will be criticized. You will be asked questions of. And she actually, for her to say that मैं किताब लिख सकती हूँ मेरी परिवार को आप लोगों ने क्या क्या कहा और किस भाषा में कहा है. I think it takes a different, I think upbringing has a lot to do with this. So I think I attribute a lot of it to Mrs. Gandhi. When I meet Mrs. Gandhi, the Prime Minister of this country has, and I don't know, I don't think I should say this.
No, say it, please.
Barkha, when I look at her, she married Rajiv Ji in 1968. he was assassinated in 1991. She spent more time in this country as his widow than his wife. And she chose this country to be her home. She was in mourning for 7 years. She feels for these issues, and which is why she's in politics. I mean, what did she get out of it? She did not become the Prime Minister of this country. Her son did not become the Prime Minister of this country. What did she get out of it?
But there are those who would say she still controlled the Congress party. And for 10 years, that was the party in government.
So people can keep saying what she controls or what she doesn't control. I know exactly where and how much does she interfere in, if at all. I know exactly the kind of respect that there is from all of us and the family as far as the Congress president is concerned. I know who has the last word. So, I mean, people can keep saying
who
all
has
of this.
The last word?
I think the Congress president has the last word in consultation with a lot of people.
Mr. Kharge today has the last word?
Absolutely.
Could he overrule Mrs. Gandhi?
I don't think there will be a question of overrule. I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of consensus building. We are not a party that is run by the diktat of one man. Please understand, the Congress can never be run like that. We are not a cadre-based party. We are a party that came out of a political movement and India's freedom struggle. We are a melting pot of ideologies, of opinions, of various things, and that also amounts to some indiscipline sometimes. But I think little gestures like, you will never have Mrs. Gandhi be seated when Khargeji walks into the room. She's a woman, she can well be seated, but she never will be. She will always walk a step behind him. She's been the president of this party for the longest. She doesn't need to, but she makes it a point to, so that others realize that he's the man in the chair of authority. You need to respect that. So I do feel that for a woman who has spent more time in this country, and she has seen what she has seen her husband being blown up into pieces, her mother-in-law being brutally assassinated, and then look at the kind of language that they use against her. I mean, look at the kind of accusations that they make against her. Who am I to defend her? But the reality is that you look at this and you feel this is not our culture. This is not the religion that you think you stand for. And this is certainly no way to deal with a woman. Or a man for that matter.
You said that you would really like to see Priyanka Gandhi in a larger role. What shape do you think that larger role might take?
No, I don't know what the larger role is, but I do think that she's somebody who understands the nitty-gritties of politics. I think she's somebody who's a very able campaigner. She can set the narratives. I'm sure the party in all its wisdom will use her appropriately.
Now, you spoke about no one having the final word, no one individual having the final word. But do you not think that Rahul Gandhi, who clearly is very much the face of the party, the leader of the party...
He is the fountainhead of ideology in the Congress. I have no doubt in my mind about that.
Somebody I was speaking to who has actually known the family a long time, so I can't name that person, said Rahul Gandhi, maybe he wants to be the Jaiprakash Narayan of this time. But I don't know if that's accurate, because my question to you would be, you're heading into an election. There isn't that much time. It's a luxury to be philosophical when you're heading into an election, right? Is Rahul Gandhi the face of the opposition political campaign going into 2024? Whether you call him a prime ministerial candidate or not, I'm not getting into the technicality of that. But do you think he is that face?
But Barkha, let me just step back and ask you, where is he being philosophical?
I'm saying we can't get into the philosophical question of JP or not.
I think it's a false comparison. I think he holds on to his ideology and his beliefs very strongly. And I think that's one of the factors that made me join the Congress, quite frankly, because you look at a barrage of political leaders, whether in the opposition or in the ruling government, how many people are willing to pay a price for speaking the truth that he does? I mean, how many people are willing to look Mr. Modi in the eye and ask the questions that he does? He lost his membership, he lost his house, but that did not stop him from asking the questions. I mean, please, let's understand, here's a man who's walked 4,500 kilometers and maybe now more, perhaps, in times to come, I don't know, because he believes that this will unite the country. And I think that one event did change India's politics. But I think to your larger question, is he going to be the face or not the face? He is definitely the ideological fountainhead of the Congress. I think our stand on issues, I think our stand on situations comes a lot from him. He's somebody who's unapologetic about what he stands for. He's absolutely fearless. And I think that's a virtue, that's a very rare virtue in politics. And he's not somebody who can ever, you can make a deal with or you can compromise with, and for a situation he's going to here's someone who says that we did not do OBC reservation in women and we were wrong, but we need to correct a wrong now and we will correct it doubly. So I think for someone to say this in Indian politics today, it takes a lot of courage. Going into elections, the Congress is the largest party in that alliance. But we also believe that we have come together not because we want to project one person as the prime minister or another is not. We have come together not to oppose Mr. Modi, but we have come together to ensure that India's constitution is held supreme, that the country as we know is protected, preserved. We have come together to ensure that democratic institutions are not compromised with. And I think on that, there is a broad consensus. I think issues like, who's going to be the face or not the face, for all practical purposes, every political party's leader is their face, and Rahul Gandhi is definitely one of our bigger faces.
Pratap Bhanu Mehta, who is certainly not a fan of the Modi government and is in fact quite a fierce critic, had a column in the Indian Express recently saying that perhaps the gap in the opposition narrative is that it was not able to address what he called the age of ambition. He said this is the age of ambition in India. He was talking about the aspirational Indian. I remember Mr. Kamal Nath, who's now leading the campaign in Madhya Pradesh, saying something quite similar after the defeat in 2014. We have failed to, he said on behalf of the Congress, address the aspirational Indian. I want to ask you, when you speak about the ideological fountainhead that Mr. Gandhi is, how does the India Alliance today look for not just what you oppose, which is the politics of the BJP, but what you stand for that can address the aspirational Indian?
I'm glad you asked me this question. Let me just turn that argument on its head, actually. For the longest, this government has been saying that we have been giving free ration to 86 crore Indians or 80 crore Indians or whatever that number may be. Now, that may have been a very important step and a very important policy intervention when India was going through COVID. And thank God for the Food Security Act, you could do it. We have Mrs. Gandhi to thank for it and Dr. Manmohan Singh. But anyways, that narrative set apart. That was a narrative that worked when people needed that for sustenance. People today say sustenance is done. What about my success? And which is why when we talk about the caste census or when we talk about we should know who stands where in this country, how many of SC, STs, OBCs are there. Why do you think we are doing this? We are doing this because aspirations of New Delhi alone don't matter. Aspirations for the rest of the country do. I mean, when Mr. Gandhi stands up in parliament and says that the highest posting for a bureaucrat is to become a secretary in the government of India, and there are 90 such secretaries, only 3 OBCs, but the numbers are startling. I mean, you look at the Bihar caste survey that has come, 64% OBCs. What's their representation? Forget about that. Look at central universities. The central universities have today an IIT between SC, ST and OBC together has 9% of its faculty. IIMs have 6% of their faculty. Are you telling me they're children of lesser God and they don't have the mental faculties to be there? Absolutely they do. I think they've been denied opportunities, and which is where aspiration also comes from. Aspiration is not confined to the English-speaking, influential New Delhi crowd. I think aspiration comes from rural hinterland India. When Mr. Gandhi was walking in the Bharat Jodo Yatra, the kind of people we met, old, young, poor, rich, small businesses, large businesses, they had one thing to say, that we have aspirations to be heard. Who's hearing us? So I think aspiration also has a very different meaning for people. For somebody, it could be aspirational that his voice or her voice is be heard. The kind of interactions he's had after meeting truck drivers. Why do you think he's meeting truck drivers? I mean, he's not a photo op guy. He's meeting truck drivers because he believes that they have aspirations which are not being met. A mechanic in Delhi, why is he meeting them? Why do you think he's meeting students in Mukherjee Nagar who are preparing for civil services? Because you have to first listen to people to be able to address their aspirations.
You spoke about the OBC quota for women. Now, I happened to be the journalist who interviewed Sonia Gandhi when the bill went through the Rajya Sabha. At that time, there were regional parties that were demanding this quota within a quota. And when I asked her about it, she said she didn't agree with those regional parties. She thought that parties who felt strongly about this were always free to find Muslim women, OBC women to give tickets to. Are you saying that this is a generational difference in thinking from Sonia Gandhi to Rahul Gandhi? Or are you saying that was wrong and this is right?
I think my leader has said it. I think Rahul ji said it in the press conference that maybe we should have had quota within quota. So I also think that nothing is cast in stone, and policy making
You're allowed
and politics
to change your mind and
should evolve, and actually should evolve. You should evolve according to the situation on the ground. Today, the situation on the ground is that between 2014 and 2023, the literacy rate, the purchasing power parity of OBCs has gone down. So, you perhaps need larger tools to empower them. You perhaps need larger representation. You perhaps need the women quota. So I saw that interview of yours, and I remember, I think INC also played parts of it. But that was the situation then. But the situation has since evolved, and I think policy making or politicians are people who should listen to the voices on the ground and evolve. I mean, look at the BJP. The BJP in 1989 actually opposed. It was because of the BJP that the women's reservation bill in local bodies couldn't get through when Rajiv Gandhi ji had got it there. I mean, the 7 votes it lost by, the 4 were of Mr. Advani and Mr. Vajpayee. But they evolved. They changed their thinking. I think that's what politics should do.
But let's explore this slogan that Rahul Gandhi has invoked of linking policy to population, jitni abadi utna haq. Do you think that this is a dangerous slogan because there is a sort of numerical majoritarianism attached to it? And today, if you attach it to caste, tomorrow you could attach it to religion, and tomorrow you could attach it to delimitation. Is this a dangerous thing? Because tomorrow southern states will not get, if the constituencies are redrawn. How far can you take numbers equal policy or allocation of resources?
I think representation is very important. And I think when he says jitni abadi utna haq, or when we say jitni abadi utna haq, we are talking about representation. I mean, look at the Bihar data. I will go back and say 84% SC, STs, OBCs. What is their representation? I mean, in central universities, there are 4% professors who come from the OBC community and 6% associate professors. Are you telling me that, and seemingly there are 50 to 51% OBCs in this country, are you telling me half this country's population can constitute only 4% professors in our central universities, 6% in IIMs, 9% in IITs? I think those are bizarre. That's bizarre data, and that data tells you that policy intervention is required. I don't think it's dangerous. I'll tell you why. If you want to stretch the argument, you can always stretch it in any way. I think it's the BJP which is stretching it, connoting to what you've said. But I think when we say jitni abadi utna haq, we are essentially saying that the marginalized communities who have been marginalized for centuries need to be given their due. They need to be brought to the center stage of policy making. Why should 90 secretaries in the government of India have only 3 OBCs who control less than 5% of the union budget? Why?
So is the next step to increase the quota cap, which anyway has been changed with the economically weaker section reservation that the Supreme Court?
I think the point that has been made, and I think it's a very well articulated point, is that we stand for the caste census. The caste census is the X-ray which will tell how broken the bone is. We will follow it up with a financial survey, with an economic survey, which will tell you the strata within the strata, which will tell you how exactly are the OBCs
Would you want
placed.
other Congress-run states to also have a
I think we've already
exercise?
committed. Rajasthan has just announced a caste-based survey.
Chhattisgarh has not released its findings though.
I think yesterday this question was asked of Mr. Gandhi, and he said very categorically that both Karnataka and other states that have had surveys, we are thinking about how and when to release it. But Rajasthan, for instance, has just announced a survey. Bihar has come out with something. We're in coalition there. I think increasingly states will be under pressure and should be under pressure. I mean, what representation does the BJP want to talk about? You've got 10 chief ministers, out of which 1 is an OBC, and he's also on his way out in Madhya Pradesh. We've got 4 chief ministers, 3 of them are OBC. So when you talk about representation, you can't rattle that we've got some ex-ministers. Everybody knows how empowered ministers in this government are. If you really want to empower the OBCs, appoint more OBCs as chief ministers, appoint more women as chief ministers.
Now, you in UP, when you were working with Priyanka Gandhi on that campaign, you all had an experiment of giving women tickets. It resulted, if I'm not wrong, in one win?
2.
Okay, 2. How did that make you feel? Did that make you feel dejected, or was that a structural Congress problem? Because this is what I fear is going to happen, going forward. It could take a few years before this women's quota is actually operational. But at that time, what did you feel?
I mean, I think we felt that Indian polity wasn't ready for this representation, and which is why affirmative action is required from a policy point of view. I think political parties alone can't make a difference. That was a very big realization. And if you need more women in decision making, you need to have affirmative action. Affirmative action by the Panchayati Raj, the 73rd Amendment, has ensured that there are 15 lakh elected women representatives today. Now you can turn around and say that some of them, those offices are being run by men, but there are very many which are being run by women. It will take us a while. I mean, women in this country have walked along with men. It will take us a while to stride ahead of them. So I don't think we can turn around and say that, this experiment hasn't worked, so this won't. I think affirmative action was required, and which is why women's reservation was something that we wholeheartedly support. I wish the government hadn't made a mockery out of it, because one doesn't know whether it's going to be 29, one doesn't know if it's going to be 39, because if you actually go by Article 82 and 81(3), it could be 2039 before which it can't be rolled out, because it says the census after 2026. So I don't know when is it going to be rolled out. It was a political gimmick from the looks of it. When Panchayati Raj came in, it came with immediate effect. When we passed the women's reservation in Raj Sabha, it was with immediate effect. Why delay these things? Why put riders like Census, and why put riders like, why put any riders like that? Why put delimitation riders? If you're really honest about women's representation, open the floodgates for them.
For you, has it been tougher to be a woman in media or a woman in politics?
I think electronic media has a lot of women. So,
but not
I'll be very honest with you, Barkha.
Owning networks and leading.
Yes, but I'll be very honest with you, Barkha. I think it's a question that I should not answer.
Because?
I think because I'm an empowered woman. I come from a very empowered background. I have never had to face hurdles, or I have never had to face discrimination by the virtue of being a woman. I've had a very strong upbringing. I have a very strong mind. I belong to a party which gives me a lot of opportunities. I think this question perhaps needs to be asked of people who haven't had the kind of opportunities that some of us did.
But there is structural inequality, which is why we're even talking about affirmative action, because...
So I don't take structural inequality lying down. If I do feel that a colleague of mine is undermining my voice or undermining me because I'm a woman, I will speak 10 times louder and be heard.
Good for you. I want to come back to ideology. On this podcast, Yogendra Yadav, once a Congress critic, today a supporter of the India Alliance and of Rahul Gandhi, he listed 3 things that he thought the opposition got wrong in its fight with the BJP. And he said there are 3 issues on which we seem to hand over the advantage to them. And he said one was on nationalism. The second was on religion, including Hinduism, and the third was on being culturally rooted. And he said, especially on the first, he said liberals had not yet, there was a gap in the liberal conscience, and therefore there was a kind of handing over, a ceding of the whole nationalism issue to the BJP. Do you agree with that? For example, in America, you'll see a liberal anchor like Jon Stewart canvassing for military veterans. Just giving you an example. We don't see a lot of that associated, at least in perception, with the opposition.
I don't agree with the word nationalism. I think the word that I hold very dear is patriotism.
Fair enough.
I think nationalism is a bogey that's being pushed to undermine our security forces. If I may actually just step back, and I was going through some data yesterday for a show that I want to do, and that data tells me that since 2021, there have been 9 terror strikes in Jammu Kashmir, in Poonch, in Rajouri, in Anantnag, and in places like that, in Kulgam. 9 terror strikes in Jammu and Kashmir during this 3-year period, which have not even been acknowledged by India's Prime Minister. He has not tweeted on it. He has not said a word of condolence. He has not said a word or paid any tribute. Why is that so? If you think that's patriotism, it is not patriotism for me. I think it's looking away from a reality and pretending that because you are not going to put out a statement there or a tweet or a post, it is not going to be acknowledged. We've lost security forces. We lost 20 of our brave hearts in Galwan. The Prime Minister told this country, koi ghusa hua nahi hai. And after 9 commander level talks, Corps commander level talks, China keeps quoting the same thing. The Prime Minister, the 3rd of May is when this whole Manipur violence started. The Prime Minister has not had one day to visit Manipur. He's gone to France, he's gone to Greece, he's gone to America, he's gone to UK, he went to Indonesia, he's gone South Africa. but he hasn't had the time to go to Manipur. Is this patriotism? So I also feel that this hyper nationalism that is being peddled actually undermines what the patriotic duty of the Prime Minister should be. And I am just quoting, and I'm giving you examples. At Punch, 5 Jawans were killed. Rajouri, 4 Jawans were killed. Anantnag, a colonel, a major, and a DSP lost their lives. Not one word from the Prime Minister's office. Are you telling me that's all right? The Prime Minister took 78 days and a horrific video to speak on Manipur. But within minutes, he could tweet on something that was happening in West Asia. How is that justified? If you ask me, the last people, absolutely the last people I need patriotic certificates from is the BJP, because I do believe they indulge in a lot of anti-India activities. If you are not going to take cognizance of the kind of poverty, the kind of unemployment, the kind of high prices, the kind of income inequality, the kind of strife India is seeing internally, what sort of a patriot are you? So I don't buy that argument at all.
But
and I'm not even going into the past where they had no role to play in the freedom struggle or they did not hoist the flag. I'm not even going into all of that. I am talking about the country as of now. I haven't heard my Prime Minister speak about Anantnag or Kulgam or Punch or Rajouri. Why?
Politically,
the Prime Minister kept shooting, and I go back in time, and each time I have a doubt, am I criticizing him too much? I only remind myself of one thing, and this is very personal for me. Because one of the people who died in the 40 people convoy in Pulwama was a man, Pankaj Tripathi, from my constituency of Maharajganj, and I had seen his pregnant wife and his ailing parents. So it's very personal for me. But the Prime Minister kept shooting for Bear Grylls' Man with Wild, and he apparently did tell a man in constitutional authority, you keep quiet about it. If Mr. Satyapal Malik is lying, the Prime Minister should file a case against him. If he's not, we have serious issues to deal with.
How will you counter this in the political domain, as you have just now? Why do people ask this question कि इस मुद्दे पे opposition हमें सुनाई नहीं देती? Is there a narrative gap?
किस मुद्दे पे?
Constitutional patriotism. Let me not even use the phrase nationalism.
नहीं, बिल्कुल सुनाई देती है. अगर राहुल गांधी एक MP ना होने पर भी, I mean, when he did go to Manipur, he was a disqualified MP. अगर एक MP ना होने पर भी वो मणिपुर में जाकर सारे समुदायों से, he met the Kukis, he met the Meiteis, he met everybody. If he can go and meet, I think that's patriotism. I think patriotism is to brave the cold, the heat, the dust, the rain, and walk from Kanyakumari to Kashmir. I think that's patriotism. I think patriotism is to stand up for people who are being oppressed. I think patriotism is to call out a BJP MP who has communal slurs against another MP in parliament, and he did not make a hoo-ha about it. He just went and met an opposition MP, and mind you, that opposition MP is not even a part of the India alliance. So sometimes I think you make a larger point by just your action instead of, I think people see through it. Who are these people who say we don't? We absolutely do, and our history is far more glorious than the BJP's can ever be. I mean, I consider one of the biggest achievements of Indira Gandhi was she looked at the world in the eye, said two hoots, I am going to help Bangladesh be formed, and she changed the world map, and Pakistan was vanquished. I think I hold a lot of esteem in the fact that I keep saying this, and I do feel very personally about this. Mr. Modi came to power in 2014, and his term is going to end now. 10 years later, he still blames the Congress for all its failures. He blames Nehru, he blames the Congress UPA government and all of that. You've had 10 years in office. Mr. Nehru, when he became Prime Minister, did not blame 200 years of colonial rule. He set around to building new India. He built institutions that have still held our liberal democracy alive. He laid the foundations for IITs and AIIMS and IIMs. And I think those are institutions that India built. I mean, I don't think Shastri ji indulged in whataboutery. He went on to usher the Green Revolution. I think Rajiv Gandhi didn't come in office and say, I have come from a personal tragedy. He went on to lay the foundation of telecom and IT revolution that, we came in 1991 where India's economic crisis was palpable, but we built an India, we globalized India, and look where we took it. We came after Vajpayee ji. We did not waste time in moaning that what has he done, what are the forex reserves, how our growth rate is. We built a new India. We built an India where people were empowered, where people had right to information, education, Food Security Act, Manrega. What has this government done? Name one thing I am saying just one thing, other than the WhatsApp university they have built. Give me one instance of how Mr. Modi has made a change to people's lives. You can orchestrate an event, but what does that amount to? How did G20 change the lives of people? It was a rotational event. It would have happened in India. If not, it would have supposed to have happened 2 years earlier. He pushed it to 2023 because he wanted to use it for elections. I was in a show and somebody said to me from the BJP, why should it be voted back? The anchor asked, and this guy said, we've had such a successful G20, we are winning medals in Commonwealth, and we've had a successful Chandrayaan. I said, how has the Prime Minister contributed to any of this? Chandrayaan is a contribution of ISRO, and hats off to our scientists. Medals being won, Neeraj Chopra has competition from the Prime Minister, but nobody else does. How has the Prime Minister contributed to this? This is the whataboutery.
Finally, let's end on a personal note. You started by sharing how you lost your parents and you lost your brother, and you avoided all of that, that gaping hole in your heart by drowning yourself in work, and then you transitioned into politics. Politics can get lonely. Politics can be unforgiving. Politics can be cruel sometimes.
It's also very satisfying.
I'm sure there's a sense of deep fulfillment when something feels good, it feels really good. But there must be moments that feel shitty. What do you do? How do you cope with
At least I haven't come across so many.
You've never had a bad day?
No. I'm very fortunate, and which is why I say I'm really fortunate, because I have always been I have had very strong opinions. And I think as a spokesperson, as head of social media, I get to articulate those opinions. And I think that makes the BJP very restless. So I haven't had.
What does Supriya do when she's not doing?
I have a lot of friends. I mean, I unwind with non-political people. I have a lot of friends. I read. I write. I read a lot. I write. I paint.
What was the last book you read?
Good question. I read.
Or the last Netflix series you watched?
I just watched. I was down with viral, so I watched. I watched this. It has even won in Busan. Hansal Mehta's. Scoop. I quite liked it.
Based on real story of a journalist.
Yeah. I think which is why I liked it, perhaps. But I think, I don't think these worlds are disconnected.
Yeah.
You never disconnected from politics, right? Because
you're always wired.
And it's not because I'm a politician, it's because I'm an Indian. I'm a citizen of this country, I'm a citizen of this world. Whatever happens in the world of politics impacts us.
Is politics for keeps? Do you ever see yourself going back to media?
Never, ever. Not at all.
Well, lucky you. Thank you so much, Supriya. It's been a pleasure.
Such a pleasure. From watching you while growing up and wanting to be a journalist to doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.